Hello!
Hi.
Welcome to the Best Damn Lunch and Learn Ever. I'm your host, Jen Hecht, and we have the amazing and talented and brilliant Esther Boykin on the show today. Thank you for being on.
Thank you for having me on.
Yes, we're back. I love talking to Esther. I get so much knowledge on family and couples and relationship advice and just the whole gamut.
Well, I try to do my best.
And you do. You do. She does. So for those that do not know Esther, she is a licensed marriage and family therapist and expert, and her philosophies on relationships and self-care has been featured in a variety of TV, digital, print, radio media outlets, including Good Morning Washington, Fox 5, the New York Times, Sirius XM, and she is on the Real Housewives of Potomac.
I was.
Yes, she's very smart and very funny. And she's also in Bustle, Red Book, and Glamour. So today, what we're going to dive deep into is family and marriage and couples and all of the above, kind of a relationship, like we call it Relationship 101. Just because I think it's so important to cover that kind of gamut, especially like knowing like some of the topics we're going to talk about obviously is communication.
Always.
I mean, hello.
That's just sort of part of what we do as human beings, right?
Yeah, I mean, hello. Yeah, we kind of need that, right? So the communication styles that we deal with, also like, and how to communicate better too, because that's key. I mean, obviously we want to keep relationships going, and knowing how to communicate better. Obviously, stressors in relationships, and then I think the most one is that we're hearing a lot about, especially we'll talk about this article I found. Actually, I had like 2 or 3 people send it to me. I was like, okay, and I kept seeing it online, and people were sharing it.
We need to talk about this.
We need to talk about it because it's like, what do you do when you find that you're in a toxic relationship? Right? There's so many forms of that. I mean, you're talking emotional abuse, financial abuse. A lot of people don't even know about that. Yeah. Right? And this article was what it means when a narcissist says, I love you. And it's all over the internet. Like
there has been a lot of articles lately about just sort of narcissistic personality disorder and like what does that mean, but also what does that mean in terms of like when you're the partner and when you're in a relationship with someone like that. And I think it's important to, I'm always like, okay, that's an actual diagnosis, right? Like everybody who feels like a narcissist isn't necessarily a narcissist in like a diagnostic sense, but understanding those traits and understanding what that looks like in a relationship, because it's not a healthy pattern.
No. And then like, how do you like get out of it, and how do you deal with it once you get out of it? Yeah. Because if you think that they're gonna stop coming for you, like
it takes a while.
It takes a hot minute.
It does, and it takes a lot of commitment and a lot of personal work. And I think that'll be. If there's anything I'm going to say, if you're just tuning in for like 30 seconds, here's the core thing. Yeah. The best way to have better relationships is to work on yourself so that you can be your best self. Without that, there's just all the rest of the stuff we can talk about just doesn't really matter. It really is about doing your own work first and foremost.
Well, that's what we're going to talk about too, is working on the reflection in the mirror, right? Because I think that is so important. We can't be the best in a relationship if we are not working on ourselves. And being the better version. I mean, there's things that you can, like I've learned, like there's things that you can't control. Like you just need to focus it on you, on like being you. Like I always said, like my only competitor is the reflection in the mirror. Like I don't.
Yeah. Well, and at the end of the day, and I say this a lot, in my work with clients, is at the end of the day, the only thing you really have control over is yourself. Right. And so it really is about how can I learn more about who I am, what I want, what I value, and what I deserve. And then you just, as you do that, you attract different kinds of relationships. You attract a different sort of person into your life, and the rest of your relationships will shift, and some of them will get better and some of them will end, and sometimes that's hard, but particularly in the case of toxic relationships, the end is painful. It's just because a relationship isn't healthy for you doesn't mean you don't love each other or that you don't love the other person at the very least. So saying goodbye is hard.
Yeah, and then I think that's actually, well, let's dive into it. So let's go right in.
Let's start there.
Let's just start there.
I like it.
We're going to go in there. And so make sure if you have any questions for Esther, make sure you drop them in the comments. And so we'll share them and say hello so we know that you are here. Yeah. Okay, so I think let's just go into like, how do we know if we are in a toxic relationship?
I think the core things are checking in with yourself. Like, do you edit yourself or center yourself around this person in a way, not in the sense of like, oh, I'm in a bad mood and maybe I shouldn't take that out on my partner, but you sort of rehearse what you're going to say because you don't want to upset them or you don't want to make them angry or you're not sure how they're going to judge you. If you censor your behavior, places you go, you don't want to tell them who you're going to be out with. And again, not because you're being deceptive, but because you fear their reaction or you feel like you can't predict their reaction. There's some sort of basic things when you're in a relationship. If I say, hey, I'm going to lunch with my girls, this should be a fairly predictable response from whoever your partner is, right? Like, oh, have a good time.
Yeah.
See you when you
later.
get back.
Yeah.
But if that person feels like it feels controlling, if you find yourself walking away and it just feels icky, like you somehow feel like we're always doing what this other person wants.
And then you get the repercussions when you come home.
And you either get repercussions when you come home or you find yourself turning down things that you thought you wanted to do, but then you don't. Like, because you're afraid of how it's going to impact. I would say it's a lot of keeping the peace. If you find yourself constantly worrying about how do I keep the peace at home or with this other person, that's a good sign that this is not a healthy relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what if those people, do they do like slow, the research I've done is, obviously, and they'll try to slowly pull you away from people.
Yes. And
so
I would
that's
say
another thing to look out for.
that's absolutely a thing to look out for. And that's sort of a theme across any kind of toxic relationship. So whether we're talking about things like domestic violence, where there's actual physical altercations, emotional abuse, financial abuse, and we can talk a little bit more about what that is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also, being in a relationship with somebody who is narcissistic or who is extremely controlling, whatever sort of words we want to use, one of the core things is anybody who's with you that wants to isolate you from the people who are already in your life, the people who historically have been loving and supportive to you. If you're with a partner who's like, oh, they're not good for you, or no one loves you like I love you.
Oh, jeez.
Big red flag.
Yeah.
Big red flag.
Run.
Yes. Just be like, hold on a second.
Thanks for coming out.
Yes. And, the opposite of that can be true because sometimes what happens is the way in which a partner like that will pull you away from other people is not by talking poorly about your family or your friends, but by essentially being like, you're the only person who understands me. And so initially that feels really good, right? Like they need me so much. They love me so much. I'm the only one who makes them feel good, who makes them feel better. But what happens is then that person still becomes the center of your universe. And so that's just as unhealthy. It isn't always sort of this very direct, like blatant, like, no, don't hang out with your friends. Sometimes it is like, oh no, sure, go with your friends. It's just, I'm really lonely when we're not together.
Or I got a headache.
Yeah. Just like,
can you come home?
Yeah, I don't feel, I don't feel good. I know you're going to go out, but I had a really terrible day. And, it's just, I don't know what else to do but to be with you. And it's nice. There should be a certain level of interdependence. Yeah. But when that starts to feel like the pattern, like they don't have other friends to spend time with. They don't like.
Oh, that's a really good point.
That's very much a red flag as well.
Right. Like if they only have, one or two friends, that should be an indicator. Or like, why are they not spending time with those friends?
Right.
Right. Like it's just them. Like, they go out and hang out with their boys. I mean, that would be like why that'd be very weird.
Right. Or family or whatever it is. And there are plenty of people who are introverted who have very small social circles. So maybe they only have two friends, but those should be two friends that they talk to regularly and they go out and they spend time and really this is in terms of if you're looking for a relationship or you're looking for a partner, everybody should have a life that feels fulfilling before they get into a relationship.
Right.
And so it goes both ways. You want to make sure that you're developing your own sense of self, but when you start dating someone and it feels like I'm the center of your world and we just met, that's a concern.
Oh, that's actually interesting. So let's talk about that. So because you hear some of the stories like, okay, you meet someone and it moves really, really fast. Is that like an indicator or is that something to look out for? I'm just curious. Ashley, hey! Who else is on here? We got Erica. Who else? Everyone's here. Say hi. All right, and don't forget to drop your comments. So we're talking about communication and relationships.
Yes. So I always tell people, I'm sort of this weird dichotomy of like super practical relationship skills and slightly don't tell anybody my dark secret that I'm also a little bit of a hopeless romantic.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say across the board if it's moving really quickly that this is, a red flag and it's a terrible sign, like danger. But it should be kind of a yellow flag. Sometimes things move quickly because you just really connect.
Right.
And that's okay and that's normal and that's natural. But in moving quickly, part of that should be things like meeting each other's friends and family. Okay. It should be about not that your lives suddenly revolve only around the two of you, but that you both are maybe eager to incorporate this new person into your already existing lifestyle and your existing social circles.
Right.
That feels a little healthier. And part of the reason that matters is when you're caught up in that initial new infatuation, you need people who know you and who trust you, who can look at that from the outside and be like, yeah, no, I get it. And, yes, friends and family are going to be a little cautious for you, but they will also recognize red flags before you do.
Right, and that's also, and they can tell energy too.
Yeah.
Thanks, Erica. We're just going to dive deep into this today, all about figuring it out.
Yes.
But I think that's, it's interesting because, you're like, oh, wow, like you have that instant connection with someone. And you're like, oh my God, this, we tell these stories in our head of like, this is the perfect person. But having someone on the outside, especially your friends, your trusted confidants, to look at and be like, from a good place, make sure those people are positive people that you're having, because you don't want any bitter Bettys. Right?
You want people who want you to be in happy and healthy relationships. And the same thing is true once you're in a relationship. I always say, like to married couples or just couples who are in long-term relationships, you need to have friends who are friends of your relationship.
Yes.
Not like fun. They may have started as your friend or his friend or whatever, but that genuinely care about your connection to another person and the quality of that relationship. Those are the friends who can say to you, who can like bitch and moan about things that your partner does.
Yeah.
But still also remind you when it's a healthy place, and also are not afraid to tell you when they feel like something's moving in an unhealthy direction.
Yeah, and I think that's that makes sense too, because if you're in a bad relationship or a toxic, especially, so let's go down the different, because I think that a lot of people aren't aware of there are different levels. Like you've got emotional abuse, you got financial abuse,
yes,
and then obviously and physical abuse.
Yes.
So let's go down and like some of the signs of emotional abuse and how to get out of that, and how to have that kind of conversation and what to look out for.
Yeah. So I think the reality is that all of those things can show up together in one relationship. They can become a progression. I won't talk a ton about domestic violence, but when there's physical abuse, I think I will say this: with physical abuse, sometimes we assume like, well, either it's not like he put me in the hospital, or she doesn't punch me in the face. Any kind of physical violence of any kind, pushing, shoving, even if it's mutual, even if like they shove you or you slap them and they push you back, that is a relationship where there is domestic violence, where there's physical abuse happening. Because the reality is one of you is stronger. One of you, in all of these relationships, the underlying foundation is about power and control. So one of you holds more power. So looking for the power and control dynamic more than like the actual physical acts is really important in identifying when it's not healthy.
Yeah, now do you think that is, do it get more aggressive when they feel like they're losing power, or losing control, or is it just, okay.
Yeah, and it happens across the board, and I'm not gonna bore you. I did a lot of my graduate research around domestic violence, so I'm not gonna bore you with a lot of those, with the nitty gritty details, but for people who are really interested, there's lots of great information online with statistics, and that kind of breaks down a lot of the typical abuse cycle.
Oh, okay.
Because what really happens is there's a honeymoon period where things are really great, then there'll be an incident, then there's an apology, and a honeymoon period again. And what happens over the course of a relationship is that the honeymoon period gets shorter and shorter and shorter.
Oh, geez.
And so what starts as feeling like this one-off scenario suddenly becomes a real pattern of abuse.
Right.
And the same thing happens with emotional abuse. So emotional abuse is anything from controlling your behavior, if you are with somebody who is forcing you to let them read like your text messages, your phones, they have your social media passwords, and I understand that there are couples where that's something you have agreed on, and it's fine, and you feel, but it's okay as long as you feel like if tomorrow you got up and changed your password, that your partner was not going to be angry or somehow that punish you for not allowing them access to your stuff.
Yeah.
Everybody's an adult, you're entitled to privacy.
It's boundaries, it's setting boundaries.
It's setting really clear boundaries. And so emotional abuse can be things of that nature. It can be things like name calling. It can be a lot of shaming, so public humiliation.
Yeah, screaming and yelling at people in public places.
Yes, screaming and yelling in public places, telling, really just undermining someone's self-worth, calling them names, telling them that they're not good enough, that no one else would want them. All of these also show up in other abusive and toxic relationships. To be clear, there's not this fine little columns of relationships. This happens on a continuum. Some of the other things that happen that people don't always pay attention to are sometimes doing it in jest, right? So if you're with somebody and they make jokes at your expense on a regular basis,
especially in front of other people too,
particularly in front of other people. So and then it's
like
kind
a
of
dominance thing, like they're trying to extort, and then you just call them out on it, and you use some witty banter, and it's funny.
Yes, and sometimes that really works.
Yeah.
Hopefully, ultimately, what will happen is you can pull that person aside, later on, out of that, and say, and this is also a good way of recognizing: is this a relationship where these are bad behaviors that you're both willing to work on, or is this a pattern of abuse that's not going to change? In which case, this is a toxic, unhealthy relationship to stay in.
Well, what if that person is saying you're crazy, you're insane? So we're going to get into gaslighting. Yeah.
So gaslighting is, which is so funny as a therapist, I'm always like gaslighting, but I realize lots of people have no idea what that means.
Yeah, so let's talk about that.
I'll define that first. Gaslighting is essentially when you are with another person who intentionally minimizes, denies, distorts the truth in an effort to make you question what your reality, essentially. It's being with somebody where, it's like if I did that, and you're like, wait, why did you just elbow me?
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about, Jen.
Right.
I didn't I don't know, maybe my arm brushed against you. I didn't elbow you though. What are you?
Right, and you're like, wait, well, maybe I missed, maybe she just did that. You know, as you start to question, because why would Esther do that? That's weird. We're friends. Why would she try to check me?
Right, exactly. I mean, I would never do something like that. I don't know why I don't know what you're talking about, and and then I do it really hard, and you're like, oh, that, and I'm like, I literally just bumped into you. It really wasn't that painful. Stop being so sensitive.
Right.
You're really overreacting, right? That's gaslighting.
That's gaslighting.
That's that sense when you are with somebody and you're almost every time you confront them about something that's bothering you, so you feel like they've hurt your feelings, or you don't like something they've said, or you have questions about an interaction, if you leave that conversation feeling like maybe I misunderstood, repeatedly finding yourself going am I crazy? Did I misread the situation? That's usually kind of a good internal indicator. Maybe there's some gaslighting going on here.
Right.
When you call somebody out and it's the whole room just saw what happened, and they still are going
nothing. What are you talking about? You're crazy. You're insane.
Yeah.
You need therapy. Yeah, actually go to therapy, because I can tell you it's a great way to get, talk to people and get your mind right. Because I think that, when your mind's not strong and you can't see it, but somebody else can see it and they can help you get out of it, is crucial.
And I will say it is a very common statement from a partner who is either narcissistic or emotionally abusive to where you're no, we have a problem, and they'll be you're the problem. Exactly. You're the crazy one. You go to therapy. But the way in which it's said makes you feel to go seek help is somehow validating that you are broken. You're the problem. It's always said in a very sort of condescending manner. Ignore the tone and go get therapy.
Yeah.
Because it absolutely, and then checking with friends, because first of all, therapy is not a dirty word. It's my favorite hashtag. That's
hashtag that.
Hashtag therapy is not a dirty word.
Yes,
that is actually my business.
Yes.
Call me later. We have t-shirts.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness.
Do you guys get mugs yet?
We have mugs.
Okay, why have I not get one?
I'm going to send you a mug.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to send you a mug, and you have to drink out of it on the next
Yes,
lunch and
I
learn.
will. I'll be
good.
Esther.
Yes. Mugs, tote bags. We got a lot of stuff. We got some new stuff coming out soon. A couple weeks. But I think therapy is really an important place. And talk with your friends and family, looking for support. That is really the number one way to recognize when there is abuse. Financial abuse is another one that doesn't get a lot of sort of coverage, a lot of discussion, but it's actually really important to understand. And another scenario in which checking in with other people is really helpful, because it's another place where gaslighting is easy.
Right. If you don't do what I say, then I'm not, you can't buy shampoo.
Yes. Right. Which, if you're not, and if you're not,
so my hair is gonna smell.
And if you're not in that relationship, that sounds what? That's crazy. Nobody would put up with
that. You're crazy. Then go in this whole thing you're crazy, you're insane. That doesn't happen, and you're oh, okay. And then you're just wait a second, did I not? I mean, so it starts just cycle, and then it's like, well, people are like, well, I'll just, and I'll say that a lot of, I hope I don't get in trouble for someone saying this.
I want you to say it.
Yeah, I wanted to say is that I think it's tough, when you look on the outside, like, oh, these people have this like perfect life, they have everything going on, but you have no idea what's going on behind closed doors. So
Absolutely.
Don't ever judge anybody. I mean, I know people who are driving $100,000 cars and can't buy food for their kids because they're saying, unless you do what I say, then you're not going to get food to pay your children. It's like, okay. Fantastic.
No, and and I think that's such an important. That is maybe one of the most crucial things for people to understand when we talk about abusive and toxic relationships, because there is unfortunately still this mindset that this happens to only certain kinds of people whose lives look a particular way, and the reality is that this happens to women and men, although more predominantly women, but absolutely they're men in similar relationships. Of every race, religion, socioeconomic class, level of education, career field, and that includes things like financial abuse. And so it's often happens in couples where there is a big disparity between income.
Right.
But I have absolutely worked with people where, I'm working with somebody who makes a 6-figure salary, who has a prestigious career that presumably other people look at and think, oh, you can buy anything you want. But all the money goes into one account and only one person in the relationship controls that account.
Yeah, and you don't have access to it.
And you don't have access. And
right, exactly. And so then you're like, oh, and then if you don't have, you ask questions like, well, how much, we owe this or we owe that, and they'll start a huge fight because they don't want you to have access to it.
And that's usually what happens. Oftentimes there's also sort of an underlying message around things like, you're the reason we have debt, or you're irresponsible with money, or ultimately, hopefully people are picking up on there's a theme across all of these kinds of relationships, which is convincing you that you are a particular way, that you are flawed in some particular way, and that this person is both putting up with you and tolerating you, but is also sort of like the rescuer and the savior.
Right.
And that's why it's really crucial to stay connected, and it's okay. I think the other part is to really have a lot of self-compassion, because sometimes what happens is we start to notice these patterns, and then we think, oh my gosh, how did I get in a relationship like this?
Yeah.
What's wrong with me? I'm broken. Who could I tell? This is embarrassing. And that's also what that partner wants. They want you to feel like you're the problem. How did you get here? And you're still not going to tell anybody, even when you start to recognize that there's trouble. And so I really encourage people to have a lot of compassion for friends and family where you see this happening. I know it's hard to be on the outside, but also a lot of self-compassion if you think maybe you're in a relationship like this. Be gentle with yourself, and don't be afraid to to seek help and to ask somebody to support you and give you some gentle but loving and honest feedback.
Yeah, I think that's true too, especially if we're going to talk about this article, what it means when a narcissist says, I love you, because like I said earlier, that this has been going all around the internet. People have been sharing it. You can Google it; it's all over. but it's interesting. Some of the things that it says, like "Dear codependent partner," what I'm about to say is not something I ever say or admit to you, because to do so would end the winner-takes-all game. That is my main source of pleasure in life, one that effectively keeps you carrying my load in our relationship. So, I mean,
that right there, I think, is really key. So when we're talking about how do I know if I'm in a relationship that's not healthy? If you feel like you carry all of the burden or the majority of the emotional labor in a relationship, and this goes not just romantic relationships, in any relationship, if you feel like you carry the larger share of the emotional labor, what it takes to stay connected and to keep the other person happy, this is not a healthy relationship to be in, and you need to address that.
Yeah, I mean, another thing when he says, I love you, I mean, I love the way I feel when you are with me, more specifically regarding you as a piece of property I own, my possession. What?
Yeah. So that's a thing. And I want to talk about
car.
No, you're not a car. And I think it's important to understand this continuum, right? Because I think there's somebody right now who's who might have been you know what, some of this sounds familiar. Oh no, my husband doesn't think of me as a piece of property. He would never refer to me as his possession. I want people to also think about, but do you feel like you're being treated as an accessory that makes the other person feel good? So whether that is you know, sort of that stereotypical, I hate the term trophy wife, but that stereotypical kind of like young, beautiful, attractive, like your partner looks better because with you on their arm, like they have that, and not from a sort of sense of like appreciation and admiration for who you are, but that you make them feel better about who they are as a person. And for some people that can be, you know, oh, she's a perfect mother and a perfect homemaker, or oh, she's, you know, a physician, or she's an executive, or she's whatever it is. Or, you know, and in the case for men, like, oh, you know, whatever, he's like this super successful, you know, millionaire guy, and or maybe it's just like, oh yeah, he's a great dad, he's a super, you know, home husband, he does whatever I tell him to do. Like, if their love for you is driven by how it makes them feel about themselves, not as a way of appreciating and admiring who you are as your own person, that is possessive.
That's a good point. I know. And also I think so too is like when people talk about, you know, your brain is superpower, right? Right? And you can create like what your thoughts become things, right? If you're thinking positive, then you'll be positive. But if you keep having that negative Nancy, you know, in your head saying, oh, you're horrible, you're this, you're that, and it can really start to drain you. Like that's why I think having therapy is so important. But also your brain is a muscle, right? So if you replace the negative with positive, and so let's talk about like if you do find yourself in that kind of situation, and like what are some of the mindset tools or what we can do to, you know, not think like, oh, we are bad, because, you know, we all like, oh, maybe they're right, like, you know.
Absolutely.
Because especially if you're a fixer, you know, like I know I'm that fixer, you know what I mean, like that's me, I'm fixing of being a fixer.
If you are a fixer, if you have a tendency to overfunction, if you tend to be a caregiver, I do feel like women often are more susceptible to that, but again, like men can have these similar traits. I like that this sort of started with, you know, dear codependent partner, because you know, codependency is a thing that happens. It's that sense of my emotional state, my happiness is dependent upon my partner's happiness. So it's much more like, it's like you're like the thermometer, like you read whatever the energy is, and then that becomes like your temperature too, as opposed to feeling like I can be happy and I can walk in a room and be with somebody I love and they can be sad, and I can feel that and I can empathize, but that doesn't mean that I have to give up the parts of me that are also happy.
Right. And I think that's also too, like, because they don't want you to be good with who you are. I mean, and celebrate your successes, because it is a competition. I mean,
there can definitely be a sense of competitiveness, because again, back to that piece of power and control, it's about creating hierarchy. And I think in the context of like narcissistic relationships, it's emotional hierarchy. Whose feelings matter more?
That's a really great point. I wish I had my bell. Ring that.
Where's the bell?
Ring that bell.
But I think that that's an important piece to understand, that it isn't just about, it's not power and control necessarily in tangible ways all the time. It really ultimately boils down to whose feelings matter more, mine or yours. And in a healthy relationship, the answer is both of our feelings matter in equal measure.
So if you have someone that does that, you know, like say a bully or, you know, this person, what are some of the tools that we can use when they start, you know, yelling at us, or, you know, I mean, and they're really starting, like, it's aggressive.
It can be really aggressive.
Like, and the threats, you know, like, oh, I'm going to take your kids, I'm going to put you on the street, I'm going to do all of these things, and you're like, oh, and as, you know, people are like, oh my God, they're going to, you know, try to come for me, you know?
I mean, the longer a relationship goes on, which is true in every relationship, the more the other person understands where you are most vulnerable. What matters most to you, what's going to hurt you the most.
Which
and
is the kids, right.
So for a lot of times it's the kids, or, you know, for some people it might be like their sense of self, like how do I look, or, you know, am I good at my job, whatever it is, but they know where it is and they're going to go for it. So I would say, number one, disengage. These are arguments that are not based in reality and logic, and it's a game. And so the number one thing you can learn how to do is disengage. This is not an argument or a battle you're going to win by engaging with that person, by getting into it. Like, they're not going to be convinced by logic. Back to the piece about gaslighting. It doesn't matter what the facts are.
No.
What matters is how they feel at the end of, you know, sort of the back and forth. And if you pull out, you know what? If that's how you feel about this, I don't have anything else to say. and then really don't have anything else to say.
I mean, like, I just don't talk to them. Like, I just don't, like, and then...
Particularly if it's aggressive, I think that that's a good way to go. And if there is a certain amount of aggression involved, then I think you also want to, again, therapy.
Yes.
This is a big, go see your therapist and talk about that, because therapists are also good at being able to hear those kinds of things, particularly therapists who have a lot of experience working with couples and relationships, and or like domestic violence or any kind of abusive trauma, those kinds of things. We just have a good ear for it.
Yeah.
I can hear when somebody tells me a story that involves zero violence, I can still hear the level of risk just because I've been doing this for a long time, and I have a good sort of ear for the process.
Absolutely.
And so, but the same thing can be true for friends and family. You have got to have a circle, and your circle could be one
circle
person,
of trust.
2 people.
Circle of trust.
But it needs to be people who are not going to be afraid to say to you, you know what? This feels like this is escalating and I'm worried about your safety. You know, things like maybe it's time to
get a restraining order.
Get a restraining order. Maybe it's time to, and that can happen in stages. It can be about saying, you know what? We need a break from communication. Please do not contact me. And again, it's about being clear, concise, direct. It's not a debate.
That's actually brilliant. Clear, concise, direct.
Yes.
The trifecta.
Absolutely.
Right?
Please do not speak to me in that tone. Please do not call me in the middle of the night. Please do not, whatever it is, please don't do that.
Right.
If you continue to do that and violate my boundary, I will I will look for ways to, to have support around that, whether that's a restraining order, whether it's changing a phone number, blocking the person, whatever. You need to think that through. But again, think that through with the support of people who love and understand what the situation is, because they're going to help you to balance that inner voice, just like you were saying. Like that voice starts to go, well, maybe it's me, maybe I'm overreacting.
Yeah.
You need an outside voice that can help you say, no, maybe
hey,
not.
There's Eve on there. Hey guys. So make sure that you drop some questions that you have for us as well.
Yeah,
but this is really good information, because I think so too. Like if you have those, negative Nancy's or Neds.
Nancy's.
No. All of the above. It's, I always say, like, when they start, if they start in on you, like, just imagine a mirror, with all of it reflecting back, because it comes down, it doesn't just come back to, I might blame their parents, okay? 100% blame the parents. Yes. They were not loved enough.
There's some generational legacy stuff there, and I will say, and I'm not going to 100% blame parents, because there's a point at which we all become adults and we make decisions about, this seems to be a problem in my relationships. Do I want to work on it or don't I? But there is absolutely, like, we can only get what our parents have to give us, and they can only give us what their parents had to give us, and so it is sort of each of us at the next generation has to do a little bit more work so that we're a little bit better. We've got a little more to give so that our kids are a little better, and so on and so on. But
I think that's so important too, like teaching the kids, especially empathy and compassion, and and if you have, unfortunately, if there's a toxic person in there, then you're going to be, you don't want to create another toxic human out there. Right? It's like, hello, and we don't need another devil, Lucifer. Like, we're good.
It takes a lot of patience and a lot of empathy, and I know that this is hard for people to hear. It has been hard for me to do in my own life. I get it. It takes work. But one of the best things that we can learn to do is also have compassion for the abusive person.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Compassion and forgiveness are not the same
as
as
allowing
allowing a person into your life. I can have compassion for a person who treats me poorly and never have contact with them again, or set really firm boundaries with them. Compassion doesn't mean that we allow ourselves to be doormats. It means that we're able to look at that person, and frankly, it really helps our healing to look at that person and go, you know what? You're giving me the very best that you know how to give in this situation at this moment. It's unfortunate that your best is this hurtful, painful, destructive, aggressive, violent, whatever it is. But this is all you have to offer.
Yeah.
And that's, I can feel for how much pain you must have that this is how you're behaving. I'm not going to accept it. I'm not going to take it into my space.
Yeah.
But when you have that compassion, it makes it easier to move to a place of, one of my therapists, Erica, says, sometimes it's not about forgiveness, sometimes it's about grace.
Oh,
if I think about what you've done, I still get angry.
Yeah.
But I can extend a certain level of grace, which is to say, like, you're a human being in suffering who's doing the best that you can. and I can allow that to sort of, I don't have to be like, you're the worst person in the whole world, and I hate you. I can just sort of say, your behavior is not welcome in my life.
My space.
Not in my space.
No.
Yeah.
No. You're still fired from my life, but
right. But I also am going to choose not to extend, because it takes so much more energy for us as human beings to extend negative emotion, like anger and pain and sadness. The more we allow ourselves to sort of, those emotions are really meant to be sort of like moved through. Don't avoid them. Move through it.
I like
and then
that.
move on to the next, whatever's coming next.
Yeah, because if you're focused on this negative, world, because that's some of their thing. Like, especially if that was an ex of yours or some of your, like, it prohibits you from really opening up and finding that love that you deserve. Too, because you're stuck in that repeated negative cycle. So just being more open and being aware, I think, doing that self-work, doing the self-help.
Absolutely.
Look at the reflection in the mirror, like, how can I get better? And ask the therapist, what are some of the steps that I can take?
Yes.
Ask Esther, call her.
You can ask me.
Call her.
Yes. I love to talk about that kind of stuff. And I think, really easy things are, I talked about this recently with another group of women at an event. Learning how to practice more self-love is not just an individual task. So there's a lot of stuff we can do. I'm big on, write yourself a love letter. Letters are just good.
Yeah.
And so when you're in a good space, write a letter to the part of yourself that comes back up. The part that has self-doubt, the part that's scared, the part that's sad, the part that's angry. Write to yourself, because so much of what we need to hear is already in us.
Yeah.
So when you're in a place where you can connect to that, like, write those letters, journal about it, whatever it is, because you give yourself a tangible way to reconnect.
Yeah, I believe that.
But also, again, broken record, social support is learning how to practice more self-love and feel better about ourselves. Doesn't mean that we have to do it in isolation. That doesn't mean that we're perpetuating codependency.
Right.
Ideally, what we're doing is we're practicing a new way of connecting to people who are loving and supporting, where it's reciprocal.
Right. Yeah, it's true. It's like, if you find yourself, you're like, well, where are my friends? Or because you've been isolated or been trying to be isolated. You go back to, like, when you were, at your best, like when you were in your lane, where you were staying in your own lane, and then you got, veered off course, but, like, you can get back. So look at who you really surround yourself with we're genuinely happy people. Like, if you're trying to strive to, I would hope you would strive to be happy, right? Who would? But if not, I think that doing that will put you in advantage, so to make you stronger. Listening to positive podcasts out there. You can look on the top 5. There's so many amazing,
there's great podcasts.
There's great podcasts, especially if you're coming over from a breakup or a divorce, or just not really knowing, where is your space in the world, and how do I move forward, but don't really necessarily know what to do. That would be...
That is, I
love that.
I love all of those ideas. Those are really good stuff.
Yeah.
And
not be so hard on yourself.
A lot of it is just learning how to not be so hard on ourselves. Like, really being patient. Like, it's a process. Like, you didn't wake up one day in a relationship with somebody who wasn't treating you well. Like, it was a gradual process, and understanding it will be a gradual process to move into, like, this next phase of your life, whatever that's supposed to look like.
Yeah, and if you get in that angry space, like, get like, God, I'm so angry with myself because, like, how can I let that person treat me like that? And, like, you get mad at your own self. Yeah. Like, you're getting mad about, like, this person, you create this thing, like, oh, this could happen, and I'm going to say this, or I'm going to do this. But at the end of the day, that isn't even reality. You're creating this in your head.
We get really stuck in the stories. My own therapist will often say, like, well, that's, like, I'll say something, and she'll be like, that's a story. And I say that to my own clients sometimes, and I have friends like that. Like, that's a story. Like, there's a lot of stuff that is story that we tell ourselves that keeps us stuck or perpetuating, like, old cycles. And so being able to recognize that. And so going back to your part, like, I really encourage looking at not just people who are, like, happy, but also people, when you spend time with them, you are vulnerable, you feel authentic, and when you leave, you feel as though you've been nurtured, and that they seem to feel the same way about you.
Right.
That's healthy, and that happens in friendship, it happens with family, and then because it helps us to rebuild, as you said, like, all of what we do is in emotion and relationship is a muscle. Yeah. Practice that, and then you'll meet people, and then you'll be like, oh, I can be in a romantic relationship where I feel authentic and my true self, and I'm vulnerable and fun and happy. And when we're not fun and happy, we have learn how to move through that together.
Yeah, I think that's true too, because you want, like, how do I say this? It's like, you want to, if you're in this situation where it's negative, right? And you're like, okay, but I really, really want to be in a healthy, happy relationship, but then you kind of self-sabotage, right? Because like, how do we get past, like, okay, well, like, I'm good right now, like, I don't need to be dating, like, and you always come up with an excuse why. And I think, I want to hear your feedback is a fear of, A, having that happen again.
Absolutely.
And B, fear of, rejection or being hurt. And then it's like, well, then we're just not going to do it.
We're just not do it. We won't do it.
We're good. Yeah. I'm just going to focus in on work, and I'm like, I'll be,
or I'll just dip my toe in, right?
Yeah,
like,
I'm just going to
be half in.
I'll do half-seas.
Yeah. Half-seas.
Dating half-seas.
Dating half-seas. Because that sounds like a really fun. And so here's the thing. Dating half-seas.
I mean, we got hashtag dating half-seas.
Focusing on work or focusing on family.
Yeah.
These are all okay parts of the overall process.
Yeah.
Just as much as diving in to a relationship and then being like, oh, this was a disaster. What was I doing?
Well, yeah. Eek. And you're like, I already friended him on Facebook.
What have I done? Darn. Like, a lot of this is really about rebuilding our trust in ourselves.
I think that's a great point.
And I think that once we come to terms with that and recognize there's a part of who we are that we have to learn how to trust again.
Yeah.
And learning how to trust her or him is really about being, again, compassionate to like, what was it about that person in that relationship that drew me in? And what was it that made me stay? What was I afraid of, or what was the sense of security or comfort that I got there that made me stay however long you chose to stay? It does, like, whenever you leave is the right moment to leave.
Right.
There's no... there's no, like, I should have done it, 2 months ago, 10 years ago, whatever. Like, whenever you got there is when you got there, and that was the right timing.
Yeah.
But how can you be really, kind of gentle with that? And then recognizing, like, we're not meant to do everything perfectly, right?
No,
you get
perfectly
out and you're
imperfect. I don't know who said that. Perfectly imperfect. I saw that someone commented.
A lot, yeah.
Perfectly imperfect.
Perfectly imperfect.
Yeah.
Which feels like a little bit of a Brene Brown thing.
You're right, exactly.
I
don't know. Well, whoever said it, it's good.
It's good. It's spot on.
It's spot on.
But I think to your point about sort of just understanding that there's going to be a process. Taking your time, like, go back into dating and giving yourself permission to, like, date people and for it to not work out, and that's okay. And that it's okay for me to be a little bit hesitant about opening up or being vulnerable or being hurt again. But also reminding yourself, I'm not that person anymore.
Right.
I've learned a lot of lessons. I've grown. I'm not that same woman. And so even if I met somebody who was just like that ex that I just got away from, that relationship can never be the same because I'm not the same woman. Right.
And it's all coming back to self-worth too. Is loving who you are and really practicing that. Like, you are enough, I love you, like saying that over and over, exercises, just so, because if you were in such a horrible place, if you're struggling, you're feeling that, like, oh my God, how am I going to get out of this thing? And you will get out of it, you just need to have that support system. But, it's going back to dipping your toe in the online dating pool. So there was one of the quotes I did in the 5 mistakes women make on their online dating profile. So I have that up. If you go on to the website, thedatingadvisoryboard.com, you can download that free guide, and it'll help you create your online profile. But when it's okay to turn someone off. Like, you're not there to date everybody. Like, oh, well, if I put there, like, I have some people, like, will say, oh, well, I need to put X, Y, and Z, like, the whole dissertation. No, you don't need a dissertation.
First of all,
like, we don't need it.
Nobody's going to read that.
No one's reading it.
No one's reading that.
No.
Way too many words.
Way too many words. Yeah. And then, but, it's just, just knowing what you want, like, really look at your core values. And I think that's something we should talk about too. But I want to get right into the communication thing too, because I think that's a major issue. Major. Is that what you're hearing?
So, yes, it's what I hear. I definitely have. In fact, we do dinners, like these couple dinners where it's like a couple, like dinner and wine pairing, and also a little bit of a couples workshop. And one of them is communication is not your problem, which basically, particularly in relationships, like, it's not so much the communication, right? Like, we're good at communication. Look at us. We're talking to each other.
We're chatting.
We got it, right?
Yeah.
I listen to you listen to me. We say things. It's great. It's usually the underlying piece. It's what we don't say, or what we're afraid to say, or how we choose to, like, express the emotional stuff that really kind of shows up as communication problems. It's not you need to learn how to say I statements, like, I feel blah, 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 blah.
So what you're saying is...
Right. So I hear you saying, which all of those are fine. I'm making fun of it a little bit. Like those can be really useful tools.
Right.
But my experience is the number one issue, particularly in relationships of all kinds, but especially romantic relationships, around communication is that we don't say 100% of what it is that we are thinking and feeling. And then our partner responds to the piece they get. And they also don't say 100% of what they're thinking and feeling. And so there's this unspoken conversation that's happening that makes us feel like you don't understand me or there's conflict.
And then is that where you have like a resentment comes in?
Yeah, you get resentment, or you're arguing about, like what restaurant to go to, when really the issue is like somebody not feeling heard, or somebody feeling lonely, or feeling a little bit, scared about the future of the relationship because you haven't been spending time together, or whatever it is. But you don't get to that because instead of saying, I feel like I haven't seen you in a week or two, and I really miss you, and I'm worried that you're pulling away from me, we say things like, I don't understand why don't you want to spend 3 hours at dinner with me? Like, why are you watching the basketball game now? Or whatever it is. It's like, but there's this underlying piece that's not being said, that oftentimes if it's said, then the other person is able to respond to that, which is either, and a lot of times it's because we're afraid of the answer.
Yeah, or like afraid that they're going to pull away, like you said, like, or afraid of, being abandonment. They're going to leave me. They're going to, because you have the scarcity mindset, which I think is, put into such an age, like, oh, well, you're single now, you better get on it because there's going to be no more men.
Yeah.
If you don't get married today.
Yes. Newsflash, there are lots of men and women, and you don't want all of them.
No.
Which goes back to what you were talking about, which is that piece of like really beginning to, I have a good friend, and like sometimes it's just sort of like, yeah, but do you want them?
Yeah.
Right? Like we spend a lot of time, and that's sort of the dating communication, I think, it's like people treat it almost like a job interview. And yeah, you want to make your best impression, and you want to like let people get to know you. But at the end of the day, you also need to ask questions.
Yeah, ask questions.
I'm fantastic, but are you fantastic for me? Like, is this
that's
a good
the key?
fit?
Okay.
Because
that's the key.
Yeah.
Is making sure like I like you, but like, is this a fit for me? Because I think it goes back to your core values and non-negotiables.
Absolutely.
And I think that being able to know what I really, really want, right? I mean, if you want kids and you want to get married, that's something you need to kind of come out of the gate and say, like just wait a hot minute. Maybe they won't notice.
Like maybe not first date,
right?
But if you've had a couple of dates and you're like, yeah, I really like this person, and they seem to really like me, and we're vibing, and
but then you've already invested. Like, so I'm going to go back and forth on that. Like, I think you need to really put that in your profile, especially if you're online dating.
If you're online dating, I think because it's really easy. Like, you don't need to be like, I want to get married and have 3 kids and live in the suburbs of Fairfax, and we're gonna easy.
Right.
Let's take it easy. Definitely in an online dating profile, you can, I think, very casually say, and most of them there's like a checkbox, right? Like, want kids, might want kids, look interested in long-term or like committed relationships.
Right.
Like those are good things to put out front, and then go on a couple of dates.
Yeah.
And it also comes, I think there's an organic flow of conversation.
Yeah.
If we allow ourselves to show up and be our total authentic selves. Like, don't worry about like, but do they want kids and I want kids? Like, trust that conversation will happen. We're not waiting 3 months for it to happen.
Right.
But I think we can wait 2 or 3 dates in.
Yeah.
Because not everybody needs to know that you want to get married and have kids, because guess what? You don't want to get married and have kids with everyone.
Right, exactly.
So let's give it a chance to sort of be like, okay, this feels like I could date you more than 3 times.
Yeah.
Then we should talk about like, these are things that I want. I don't know that I want them with you yet, but I like you and I want to go out. And if we're going to continue to find out if we like each other that much, here are some things that ultimately long-term are going to be non-negotiable for me.
Right.
And if you know already that those are things you have zero interest in, then maybe we shouldn't keep going out. But I think giving a little bit of space for making sure, do I really like this person? Yeah.
But then what happens if you really like that person and then you're like, we are on the polar opposites?
Then you trust that just like you met them and you liked them and you had, 3 great dates.
Yeah.
You'll meet someone else and you'll like them and you'll have 3 great dates and you'll say it and they'll be like, oh, I'm totally into that. Yeah, like I would like the same thing, and you find out. But I think there's, as you said, like the scarcity mindset. Like,
yeah.
oh, there's not enough people. Like,
exactly.
You don't want everybody.
No.
No.
It's a pass.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. It's like, well, someone was saying, like, there's always somebody better. There's always, but I think it's also a mindset, like, you know, like creating that, being open, because I know a lot of people, they're like, oh, well, I want to be dating, but they're not really open to it, or they are on the online dating and they are not doing it.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, I think it's more of a fear-based, too. Like, their fear of being hurt.
Absolutely. Or bad dates or these kinds of things.
Yeah, like, oh, I had one bad date, and then, like, I'm just going to cancel.
Yeah.
No.
Like, you know what? I had one bad apple. I didn't stop buying fruits.
Yeah. Or apples.
Or apples. Right? Like, you go back.
It's good for you.
Yeah, like, you go back and you look, and you recognize, like, oh, I didn't really look at that one, and I didn't look for this, and that's really, you know, and
you didn't check for bruises on the
yeah.
you know, or like it's, you know, moldy, or like, you know, just like,
yes.
So
yeah, that's a big part of it.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so I can't believe the hour's almost over. I know. All right, so what else did we talk about? What other big, let's do this. This is important. If you find yourself, you know, depressed about, you know, maybe a breakup or a relationship or a divorce, and the depression, there's certain steps. Obviously, I mean, therapy is important, but is there any kind of mental, like, what can we do if we feel kind of down and want to?
So I tend to take a very balanced approach, which means that you need to allocate time to allow yourself to be sad. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, it's if you have, whether it's the end of a relationship, you know, a tough time at work, with children, whatever it is, like, we need to allow ourselves space to feel things that are uncomfortable. You know, human nature is that we avoid that. And so giving yourself space. If you're in bed for 2 weeks and not wanting to get dressed, therapy. Please call a therapist.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Absolutely.
If you can't find somebody, call a friend and ask them to help you find somebody.
Yeah.
If you're looking at, you know, more days than not in a like 10 to 14 day period, that's like non-negotiable. We need to involve professional help.
Yeah.
But giving yourself some space to feel sad, and whatever that looks like, and like really ask yourself, I'm really sad. How can I nurture myself? Not how can I feel better? How can I nurture myself in this feeling?
Yeah.
And for some people, it's like, you know what? I need to get moving. I'm going to go out dancing, or I'm going to go for a run, or I'm going to go to yoga. For some people, they need to kind of like be quieter. Like, I'm going to whatever, go take a bath, or I'm going to take a nap, or I'm going to spend this weekend, you know, home in my PJs, reading books, you know, drinking my herbal tea, or, you know, wine in moderation. Wine in moderation. If we're drinking a lot of wine to make ourselves feel better, again, call a therapist. We need, you know, everything in moderation. But giving yourself that space, and then also kind of challenging yourself and saying, like, what's one thing I don't want to do, but that typically makes me feel better?
Yeah. And
I have a client that I love, and, you know, like, for her, it was like every day I get up, I do my hair, I do my makeup, like, even if I don't have to leave the house.
That's a good, yes. Okay.
It's just like, I get up and then I pass a mirror and I feel better, as opposed to like, I haven't combed my hair and like I'm in sweats and whatever.
Didn't wash my hair.
Right, didn't wash my hair, didn't do anything. And you know, she may or may not get dressed, but like that is like a core thing.
Yeah, exactly.
She's like, that works for her. And for other people, it's like, you know what, I go to the gym, or I go to a yoga class, or I go to my book club, or you know what, every day I call my best friend.
Right.
Even though I don't really want to talk and I don't want to deal with whatever's going on. Right. But so having that balance between saying much like a mom. Yeah. You know, a lot of my advice is like, figure out how to like mother yourself like in the best possible way. And like, I mean, that's what I do with my kids. I imagine that's what you do with your kids. Yeah. It's like, there's a space for like, I'm going to coddle you. Yeah. This is hard and you don't feel good, and oh, my poor baby, and you know. And then I'm also going to be like, but you don't feel good, and this is how we feel better. Yeah. And that you have to have that balance between the two. And then, of course, and asking friends, like, you know, therapy's for everybody. Most of the people you know have a therapist, or they had a therapist, or their brother, or their sister, or their kids. Like, don't be afraid to ask, and people will make suggestions. Yeah, I mean, because it's just making you stronger. I mean, the more knowledge you have, the better you will be. I mean, bottom line, it's like an advantage, like a mental advantage. Yeah. That's how I look at it. We had back when I played tennis. I mean, my dad growing up, I had a mental strategy coach. Yeah. You know, and that would help me with visualization. And I'm telling you, that was probably one of the best investments my dad ever made, because it helped me throughout the years when, you know, when tough situations would come up in relationships and everything like that. Like, if I legitimately didn't have that, like, you know,
that it would be interesting.
It would be interesting.
It would be interesting. But I think it's true. They really reach out for help, and also exercise. I mean, we cannot. Exercise is huge because not only does it's just make sure you get up there and go. You're gonna feel better. Like it changes your receptors in your brain. There's so many benefits to it.
There's great research around exercise.
And feeling stronger, because if you feel strong, like you're getting out there and you're going to the gym and you're putting yourself, not getting out of your bedroom.
Yes. Leave your bedroom. Go outside. Do some things.
And you feel better, and then it shows. It shows in your skin. It shows in your attitude. It releases serotonin. There's a couple other things. I'm gonna post it. I'll post it later. The link.
There's endorphins and adrenaline, all of those kinds of things that genuinely do actually improve the brain chemistry, so that you emotionally feel better. It is a really good mood booster. Yeah. And as somebody who hates to go to the gym and doesn't really like to run, broaden your definition of exercise. You do not have to become a gym rat.
Right.
No offense to all of my favorite gym rats out there. I have lots of friends who love the gym and it makes them so happy when they go. Right. I hate getting to the gym, but I know that, and that's okay. So I go sometimes, and other times I go for a walk with my dog.
Yeah.
Or I really like to go hiking. I'll go hiking. Broaden that to move your body. Yeah. It doesn't have to look like what your sort of preconception of exercise is or what everyone else is doing. It can be yoga, it can be Pilates, it can be walks, it could be boxing, it could be
tennis.
It could, go kayaking down in Georgetown. But being out, especially if you can be outside, but even if it's not outside, thinking about in terms of how can I move my body for 30 minutes?
Yeah, and it also shows the studies have shown that if you're working out first thing in the morning, some of the most successful businessmen and women out there will work out first thing in the morning, because what it does is it expands your brain so you're really hyper focused for 2 hours after.
Lots of focus, lots of energy to get you through the day.
Yeah.
Typically you can sleep better at night.
Yep.
And also from a really basic logistical standpoint, if the first thing you do before your day starts is work out, there's no excuses not to get it done later in the day. It's really
I know.
If you've worked all day, it's really hard to get some exercise in. Although, if you're more of a walker, then an evening walk for 30 minutes after dinner also has a lot of health benefits around things like improved digestion, improving your metabolism, actually having better sleep at night. Just looking at the timing. But first thing in the morning is really good if you're looking for how can I find more energy, especially if you're feeling more depressed and sort of depressive type symptoms. Morning workout. If you feel more anxious, evening walks. You can work out in the morning too, but also evening walks. Walking, not running, not high, heart rate kind of activity, but evening walks will be really helpful for sleep. Helps you clear your head.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Huh. Good to know. I'll take the dog on a longer walk.
There you go. Yes.
The kiddos.
That and moon milk, which is I will send you this. I'll send you the recipe. I'll send it to her. She'll post it.
I'll post it.
Which I've just started drinking, which is kind of fun.
Really?
Yeah. Plus, it's pretty. I like pretty. Random.
Yeah, pretty sort
pretty, and it's frothy and whatever. But
really, oh, I like that. And then also, you want to help sleep better. Lavender oil on your feet.
Lavender oil on your feet is really good. You can get White Sound or Thunderstorm for apps on your phone. Also, 20 minutes or so before bed, no more electronics.
Thank you. TV
off, lights off. I have salt lamps in my room. Ooh. So I'll turn the salt lamps on, but turn off the other because it's more of a red base light. The blue light makes you stay up.
Yeah, exactly. I'm put that phone over. I was I'm gonna leave you over here.
Yes.
So that's awesome. Okay, so all right. Well, we're out of time.
We are.
This is good. Thank you so much for being on the show. Now,
thank you for having me.
How can everyone get in touch with you? Please.
So, if you are on social media and that's how you want to get me, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Esther B MFT. So it's ESTHER-B for Boykin, and then MFT for Marriage and Family Therapist. So that's a good way to find me. Beyond that, the easiest website to get to is estherboykin.com. That links you to everything else I do. If you're in the DC area and you're looking for a therapist, I have a team of amazing therapists. That website is grouptherapyassociates.com.
Yes.
And I'm going to give a little plug, although we spend a lot of time talking about relationships that you need to get out of.
Yeah.
For those of you in relationships that you love and adore and want to nurture and nourish and flourish, I do have 2 couples retreats coming up.
Oh yeah, let's talk about that.
So Intimacy in the City is a weekend retreat. at a gorgeous, I love this house in DC, private chef, couples massages, evening wine reception, all your meals are provided, lots of really good. It's great for couples who are at the beginning, really at every stage of relationship, who just kind of want to like work on relationship skills, or
because they may, like, it goes back to what you were saying too, is like if it goes down through the generations, they may just not know the skills to do it. They just don't have the tools.
Absolutely. And even when we have the tools, we got to practice them, and so this is a great way to connect with. It's a very small, I always keep our retreats very intimate, so small group of couples, but it also helps you connect with other couples who are about what you're about, right? They want to make their love last too. So you can learn about Intimacy in the City, which is August 17th to 19th here in DC. And then we will be in Costa Rica for a week in November. I'm really excited about the Costa Rica, like, oceanfront cottages, and again, private chefs and couples massages and evening bonfires and morning yoga.
That sounds amazing.
Amazing things. So either on estherboykin.com, or you can go to therapyisnotadirtyword.com.
Yep.
That's all of my events, all my retreats and dinners and workshops and stuff. So check it out.
Yes. You guys, oh my gosh, she's so good. I'm telling you, we got to do part 2 because we didn't even get to half the questions.
I know. Part two.
Part 2.
Yes.
I love it.
I'll come back next month.
That's right. That's a good idea. Okay, we'll do that. All right, guys. Well, talk to you later. Have a great day. Be awesome. See ya. Bye.